There are battles that happen not in the open field, but behind the silence of a glance or the stiffness of a tone. When someone harbors affection they dare not speak, the signs are rarely loud. They are small, quiet as a heartbeat, subtle as a shift in breath. And yet, for those who pay attention, they are unmistakable. The guarded smile, the first sign, is restraint. Not absence of emotion, but its careful curation. When a person feels deeply but fears too much, their smile may hesitate, as though they must ask their heart for permission before letting it show. The affection is there, just chained. An awkward distance. Have you noticed the space they keep? Not just physical, but emotional. One moment close, the next pulled away. This is the second sign. They are afraid that nearness might betray them, so they create a distance. But not because they wish to be far, only because closeness feels dangerous. The eyes that look away too quickly. Consider the eyes. Our gaze is often more honest than our words. Someone who's wrestling with hidden feelings may struggle to meet your eyes. When they do, it lingers a fraction too long, then darts away, as if connection might expose too much. The overreaction to small things, small words, carry too much weight. They might bristle at a joke or retreat after a compliment. This is not because they dislike you. It is because they are disarmed by how much they care. Their reaction is not to you, but to their own vulnerability. The need to contradict themselves. They say one thing, then act another. They speak coldly, yet rush to help you. They avoid you, yet always notice your presence. This contradiction is not confusion, it's conflict. The mind says, protect yourself, but the heart whispers, go to them. The interest they pretend is not there. They may ask others about you while pretending they are indifferent. They'll remember small details, your favorite book, your opinion on rain, things they shouldn't remember if they didn't care. Yet, when asked, they shrug, as if none of it matters. The burden of a conscience at war. The seventh sign is sorrow, not for what is, but for what cannot be. Perhaps duty, timing, or morality tells them their feelings are forbidden. So they do not deny the affection. They deny the right to act on it. You'll see it in their silence, in the way they choose principle over passion. When someone feels something deeply, but believes they must not express it, the result is rarely silence. It is restraint. Not the kind of restraint born from politeness or detachment, but a deliberate holding back, like someone pressing against the gates of their own heart to keep them from swinging open. This kind of inner conflict reveals itself in curious ways, often unnoticed by the casual observer, but those who look closely will find that love held under pressure doesn't vanish. It leaks. It escapes in glances too quickly averted, in compliments swallowed mid-sentence, in pauses that seem to carry more than words. There is a certain unease in the presence of the beloved when feelings are being suppressed. The person may act composed, even distant, but their composure is brittle, like glass under heat. The warmth of their affection pushes against the surface, and you can almost see them wrestling with it, smiling with hesitation, speaking with careful neutrality, choosing words that are technically correct, but emotionally hollow. It is not that they do not feel, it is that they feel so strongly. They fear what might happen if they let go, and so they practice caution, not indifference. This restraint is not cold. In fact, it is a sign of just how deep the feelings run. If their heart was shallow, there would be nothing to hold back. But love, when genuine, can be overwhelming, even frightening. It comes with vulnerability, with the threat of rejection, with the loss of control. So instead of rushing forward, the person steps back, not out of apathy, but out of reverence. They begin to edit themselves in your presence. They watch their gestures, limit their gaze, rehearse their tone. The more they feel, the more they monitor the expression of that feeling. And yet, no matter how carefully they try to manage it, affection has a way of showing through. It peeks out in those unguarded moments, when their smile comes too quickly before they catch it, or when they reach to help without thinking. Then they seem to realize they've said or done too much, and they pull away again, as though proximity itself were dangerous. They build small, invisible walls, not to keep you out, but to keep their own emotions from spilling over. They might act distant after a moment of closeness, not because they regret it, but because it frightened them, because letting their guard down even for a second felt like walking too close to fire. Often, this restraint is accompanied by an internal debate you will never hear, but its effects are visible. The person may rehearse every interaction afterward, wondering if they gave too much away. They live in the tension between what they wish to say and what they believe they ought to say, and because they are trying so hard not to let their feelings show, their behavior may seem inconsistent. At times, they appear engaged and warm, at others, aloof and neutral. But this inconsistency is not evidence of a change of heart. It is the evidence of a heart divided against itself. There is also a peculiar kindness in such restraint. The person may believe that revealing their feelings would burden you, or complicate your life, or cause harm. So, they choose to protect both you and themselves by hiding what they feel. In doing so, they suffer quietly. Not all suffering wears a sad face. Sometimes it wears a smile, and sometimes it hides behind politeness and casual conversation. They may offer you help, encouragement, even friendship, but always within visible boundaries. They may be present, but you sense they are holding something back, something precious they refuse to offer. Not because it isn't there, but because it is too dear to risk. This is the sorrow of noble restraint. The kind that chooses silence not because it lacks the words, but because it believes those words might disturb the peace or disrupt the order of things. There is a dignity in such hidden affection, but also a profound loneliness. To feel so much and yet speak so little, to be full of warmth yet wear a coat of cool composure, is not the absence of love. It is love exiled, love waiting, unsure of whether it is welcome, and thus choosing to hide behind reason, duty, or fear. And so, the battle continues within them, not against the feeling itself, but against the consequences of revealing it. In every kind gesture held back, in every moment of closeness deliberately undone, in every smile they choose not to show, you can hear the silent echo of a heart that wants to be known but dares not speak. There is a peculiar kind of distance that arises not from dislike, but from fear of intimacy. It is the kind of space people construct, not because they wish to be away from you, but because being too close might unravel something within them. Emotional guarding is not the absence of feeling. It is the armor built to protect the heart from what it most desires. One does not guard against emptiness. One guards against being hurt by fullness, the fullness of affection that threatens to expose weakness, longing, or unresolved wounds. The guarded person is not easy to spot at first. They often appear sociable, warm, and polite, even attentive. But there is a threshold beyond which they will not go. As soon as the conversation grows too personal, or the silence between you too sacred, they retreat. Their retreat is not dramatic, it is subtle, woven into the fabric of their manner. They may change the subject, crack a light joke, or glance away at the exact moment vulnerability might have passed between you. These are not signs of indifference. They are signs of self-preservation. What makes this guarding difficult to understand is its unpredictability. The person may seem open one day and closed the next. They may linger in your presence with what seems like genuine fondness, then become curiously distant without warning. This inconsistency is not a tactic. It is the push and pull of someone who longs for connection but fears its cost. Their inner dialogue is a tug of war between two truths, that you mean something to them, and that meaning anything to someone is dangerous. Because what is meaningful can be lost, and what is vulnerable can be wounded. In guarding themselves, they are not necessarily rejecting you. They are rejecting what being known might require of them. For to be truly seen is to risk being misunderstood, or worse, unreciprocated. They may have learned from experience or observation that closeness brings pain. Perhaps they once opened their heart and were met with betrayal. Or perhaps they've never known what safe closeness feels like, and the mere idea of being emotionally available feels foreign, even threatening. So they build walls, not high, but strong, transparent enough to let light in, but thick enough to keep touch out. The most common behavior of a guarded heart is silence at the edge of revelation. There are moments in every relationship, friendship, romance, or otherwise, when a person could say more but chooses not to. They stop themselves at the edge of confession, not because there is nothing to say, but because saying it would make them visible. The guarded person rehearses vulnerability in their mind, but seldom allows it to reach their lips. They are fluent in affection internally, but speak it only in measured, coded ways. A compliment given as a passing remark, a concern phrased as a joke, a moment of care disguised as a favor. Their emotional restraint is often misunderstood as detachment, but beneath it lies a storm of quiet feelings, carefully concealed. You may find that their eyes linger on you longer than necessary, or that they seem unusually aware of your presence, even while keeping their own distance. This tension between attention and avoidance is the signpost of emotional guarding. They do not lack awareness of you. They are hyper-aware. But that awareness makes them cautious, and their caution breeds control. Every word is filtered, every expression moderated. Spontaneity, which is the language of the unguarded, is something they suppress. There is a tragic nobility in emotional guarding. It is often done to prevent harm, not only to oneself, but also to others. The guarded person might believe that giving in to their feelings would be selfish, or would burden the other with expectations they have no right to form. So they pull back, not because they don't care, but because they care too much to let that care complicate someone else's life. Their love, if it exists, is bound by duty, fear, or timing, and so it waits hidden beneath a surface of composure. Emotional guarding also has a temporal nature. It is not always forever. Sometimes the walls are temporary shelters rather than permanent prisons. The person may be watching, measuring, discerning whether the environment is safe enough to disarm. Until then, they remain composed, careful, kind, but unreachable. You may find yourself standing close to them, yet unable to feel their true presence. They may be next to you in body, but miles away in openness. It is not absence, it is protection. A cautious heart does not mean an empty one. On the contrary, it often means there is more there than anyone suspects. Only it is buried beneath layers of self-protection, awaiting the moment when it might finally feel safe to emerge. When the heart begins to feel what the mind is not ready to admit, the result is not always silence or sincerity. It is often the theater of indifference. A person may feel overwhelmed by the presence of affection, and instead of leaning into it, they run the other way. Not physically, but emotionally. They mask what is real with what is rehearsed. Indifference becomes their shield, a convenient mask to cover a deeply conflicted soul. It is not a lack of care that fuels their behavior, but the fear that caring too much will betray them. So, in place of warmth, they offer coldness. In place of closeness, detachment. But the performance is never perfect, and even the best actors leave behind traces of truth. There is something curiously sharp about overcompensated indifference. It does not flow naturally. True indifference is relaxed, unbothered, and unconcerned. But this kind, the kind used to fight back inner affection, has a stiffness to it. It's too controlled, too purposeful. It lacks the spontaneity of someone who truly doesn't care. It is a calculated posture, one maintained to prevent vulnerability from seeping through the cracks. A person might speak to you with a tone so casual it borders on dismissive, not because you are unimportant to them, but because you are too important to risk revealing how they truly feel. Their aloofness is often marked by a refusal to engage in emotionally meaningful conversation. They'll keep things surface level, not because they enjoy the shallow, but because the deep might uncover what they are trying to bury. They may appear uninterested, even bored in your presence, but there are inconsistencies if you pay attention. They remember details you mentioned weeks ago. They seem unusually aware of your mood. They know when you've changed something small, your routine, your hairstyle, your tone. This contradiction between what they say and what they observe betrays their act. A person truly indifferent does not memorize, but one who pretends not to care often remembers everything. Overcompensated indifference is often laced with subtle irritation. They may seem annoyed by your joy, your closeness with others, or even your absence. But rather than confront these feelings, they belittle them or brush them off. They might tease you more than necessary or give sarcastic responses as a way to create distance. The irritation isn't rooted in dislike. It is the discomfort of wanting what one is trying to resist. Every act of emotional distance is, paradoxically, a form of nearness. The stronger the effort to appear unaffected, the more likely it is that something deeply affecting is hidden beneath. This behavior can also take the form of inconsistent effort. Sometimes they're present, even kind, and then suddenly cold and unavailable. Their presence is unpredictable, like waves hitting the shore, never quite still, never fully committed. This inconsistency is not rooted in manipulation, but in the fear of exposure. Being too kind might make their feelings obvious. Being too distant might make them feel regret. So they oscillate, trying to balance emotional safety with the pull of genuine care. Each withdrawal is a defense. Each return is a surrender, however brief. Sometimes this indifference even extends to over-correction. They might speak about you dismissively in public. Even when their private actions suggest otherwise, they may ignore your achievements or appear unmoved by your struggles. But this detachment is usually exaggerated. It serves as a decoy. The person wants to appear immune to you, to show themselves and perhaps others that they are untouched by your presence or your significance. But the very need to prove this betrays the truth. People do not go to such lengths to demonstrate a lack of emotion unless emotion is present. This kind of emotional camouflage is often born from pride, past wounds, or timing. The person may feel they are not in a position to show affection. They may fear rejection, or worse, the loss of control over their feelings. They might have been hurt before, and now they view any new affection as a threat rather than a gift. So, to regain control, they project indifference. They would rather be seen as disinterested than risk being seen as vulnerable. This is not the absence of desire. It is the consequence of desire that is deemed unsafe. If you look closely, their behavior is not empty. It is overflowing, but in reverse. Every cold shoulder, every dry reply, every shrugged off conversation is an echo of something they are trying to bury. They are not trying to convince you that you don't matter. They are trying to convince themselves. And in that performance, the truth remains visible, not in what they say, but in what they avoid saying. Not in what they do, but in what they make a point not to do. Their indifference is not a wall, it is a curtain. And behind it stands someone whose feelings are louder than their words will ever be. Jealousy, when it is unexplained, speaks louder than words. It is not rooted in ownership or entitlement, but in suppressed affection, an affection that has not been acknowledged, even by the one who feels it. It arises when someone sees you giving attention to others, laughing too long at someone else's joke, or simply being appreciated by someone they consider a threat. Not because they have a claim over you, but because they've quietly grown used to you. Jealousy, in this hidden form, does not wear the usual colors of rage or confrontation. It appears in more modest, concealed ways: a quiet mood shift, an unexpected silence, a strangely cold response, or a sarcastic remark that bites more than it should. The individual who is fighting their feelings often does not recognize their jealousy for what it is. They do not consciously say, "I like you, and I feel uneasy watching you with someone else." Instead, they experience a sudden discomfort, a restlessness, a kind of low-grade inner protest when you are emotionally or even socially close to another. They may not even know why they are reacting the way they are. This internal confusion manifests in behavior that is difficult to read unless you are looking closely. They might interrupt your interactions, steer the conversation away, or attempt to reclaim your attention with subtle efforts, sometimes through humor, sometimes through irritation. This form of jealousy is not malicious. It is tender, though it may not seem so at first. It is rooted in a longing that has been locked away, perhaps for reasons of pride, fear, or circumstance. The person may not feel free to express how they feel, so they protest through silence or sarcasm. They might mock the person you're engaging with, not out of true dislike, but because that individual represents a disruption to the fragile equilibrium they've created. An equilibrium where their affection for you remains hidden, safe, and undisturbed. When another person threatens that balance, jealousy breaks through the cracks. Sometimes this jealousy is expressed through comparison. The person may subtly criticize the one who has your attention or downplay their qualities. "He's not that funny," they might say. Or, "She always does that to get noticed." These comments are not about the other person's flaws. They are a veiled way of asking, "Why are you looking at them when I'm right here?" But the question is never asked directly. It would require too much vulnerability. So instead, they build walls of critique and pretend that their observations are objective, when in fact they are deeply personal. At times, their jealousy leads to withdrawal. They disappear just when they sense you're growing closer to someone else. They excuse their absence with logic. "I've been busy. I needed space. You looked like you were having fun." But underneath these justifications is a desire to protect themselves. Watching you be open with another stirs a storm in them that they cannot bear to sit with. So they retreat, not because they are done with you, but because they care too much to watch and too little courage to intervene. Their absence becomes a quiet confession, even if they never speak a word. There are moments when their jealousy spills over, not in rage, but in restlessness. They fidget when your name is mentioned in another's mouth. They glance over too often when you're in conversation with someone else. They grow uncharacteristically quiet when you share news involving someone they see as competition. These are not random fluctuations in behavior. They are signs of an emotional struggle, a war within. A desire to stay composed warring against the desire to claim something they've told themselves they do not want. Unexplained jealousy also often appears in exaggerated indifference. The person may go out of their way to show how little they are affected by your interactions with others. They may act amused or unaffected, even cheering you on in ways that seem overly enthusiastic. But if you look closely, you will sense the hollowness behind the words. It is a performance, a denial of pain wrapped in the costume of friendliness. This too is a form of jealousy, not the kind that lashes out, but the kind that hides in plain sight. And in rare, unguarded moments, they may even hint at their struggle through accidental revelations. A slipped word, a glance too long, or a phrase like, "You and your admirer," said with too much weight. These moments pass quickly, often followed by laughter or a change of subject. But if you catch them, they speak volumes. They reveal that beneath the facade of indifference lies a heart quietly wrestling with emotions it cannot name aloud. A person's emotional weather can change unexpectedly in the presence of someone they care about, but are trying not to. Their joy may quickly give way to quietness, and their laughter may suddenly turn into distance. These shifts are not signs of manipulation or instability. They are symptoms of an inward conflict. A heart pulled in two directions, one by affection, the other by resistance. The presence of the person they are trying to resist becomes both a comfort and a confrontation. And because they have not fully acknowledged their feelings, their emotions seem to operate without a clear pattern. One moment they may seem delighted by your presence, genuinely engaged and alive in the conversation, only for the next moment to fall into silence or retreat. This shift is rarely explained. They might look away, change the subject, or suddenly excuse themselves without a reason. The reason, of course, is internal. Your closeness brings out something in them they are unsure how to hold. It awakens a longing they have tried to suppress. And because this longing does not yet have a safe place to land, it expresses itself through inconsistency. Their laughter may be too loud at times, not because they find something especially funny, but because they are trying to stay above the tide of their own thoughts. They may joke frequently, using humor as a defense against emotional exposure. But the humor fades quickly, and what remains is often a sober stillness, as though something deep within them has surfaced momentarily and then withdrawn. These emotional tides are not artificial. They are real, but they are directed by an unseen storm, the turmoil of caring deeply without a framework to confess it. Sometimes their mood changes are reactive. If you show affection to someone else, even casually, their demeanor might tighten. Their words may become shorter, more calculated. But then later, they may return with an unusual sweetness, as though trying to make up for the coldness they can't explain. The rhythm of their behavior is not consistent, but it follows an emotional logic. When they feel close, they soften. When they feel exposed, they retreat. Each swing in mood reveals a new layer of their struggle. They may also experience moments of oversharing followed by withdrawal. In one breath, they speak vulnerably, perhaps telling you something they haven't shared with anyone else, and in the next, they act as though nothing happened. These bursts of honesty are unplanned. Something in your presence makes them feel safe enough to open the door briefly, but the reality of their own openness frightens them. They close it quickly, retreating into a colder or more formal tone, hoping to undo what was revealed. Yet no amount of distance can erase what has been shared in truth. Mood swings may also be driven by your unpredictability. If they perceive you as emotionally close one day and distant the next, it intensifies their inner confusion. Not because you owe them consistency, but because they are trying to understand where they stand with you, while also pretending they don't care. They are observers who long to be participants, but their fear keeps them behind the glass. Every gesture of yours becomes amplified in their emotional world. A compliment might lift them for hours, a missed glance might drop them into silence. Their emotional landscape is mapped not by your words alone, but by the meanings they secretly attach to your presence. There is also a kind of anger that arises, not at you, but at themselves. Anger that they cannot be unaffected. Anger that they feel more than they can admit. This internal tension leaks out in irritability. They may snap unexpectedly or criticize something small. But what they're truly frustrated with is their own inability to remain indifferent. Their affection, repressed and unresolved, becomes heavy. It spills into their mood, colors their tone, and disturbs their equilibrium. The very thing they try to hide becomes the very thing that governs them. Their mood swings are sometimes framed as reactions to external events, but those explanations rarely hold up under scrutiny. The cause is often you, though they would never say it aloud. Your nearness brings them joy they don't know how to handle. Your absence brings them a sadness they are ashamed to feel. They want to stay composed, unaffected, guarded, but the heart is a wild thing, and it resists control. Their changing moods are not proof of disinterest. They are evidence of something far more profound, a love denied permission to speak, but determined to be felt nonetheless. When someone is fighting their feelings for you, they often attempt to mask their vulnerability with the appearance of emotional distance. They speak in tones too flat, act too casual, and behave too indifferent, as if your presence barely registers. But this performance of indifference is not the absence of emotion. It is the desperate presence of too much of it. The human heart, when threatened by exposure, wraps itself in coldness to avoid being seen. It is a defense, not a truth. The one who truly doesn't care acts naturally, but the one who does care, too deeply, too inconveniently, feels the need to overcorrect, to balance the scale of emotion with false detachment. Overcompensated indifference reveals itself in exaggerated nonchalance. They may shrug off things that should matter to them. Your good news, your gestures of kindness, even your affection toward others. Not because they are unmoved, but because they are too moved. And to feel too much when one is not yet ready to admit it is to risk exposure. So they build walls with apathy, cloaking their true response under the disguise of, "It's no big deal." But to the sensitive observer, these moments betray the trembling soul behind the mask. Sometimes their detachment manifests in sarcasm, They joke about your habits, make light of your interactions, or playfully diminish the value of what connects you. Yet behind each joke is a question they're too afraid to ask. Behind each quip is a longing they're trying to silence. The laughter they offer is not the laughter of joy, but the laughter of camouflage. It is a form of speech that allows them to approach vulnerability without crossing into it. They speak in riddles so they do not have to speak in truths. In conversations, they keep things surface level, even when opportunities arise for depth, for emotional openness, for gentle exchange. They steer away, talking instead about irrelevant things. The weather, a distant memory, a random fact. This is not because they lack interest, but because emotional closeness threatens the boundaries they have set for themselves. If the moment grows too intimate, they retreat behind a wall of trivialities. Their silence in these moments is not empty, it is overflowing with unspoken feeling. They may also create unnecessary distance through logistics. They delay responses to messages. They cancel plans. They act busy when they are not. These actions, when taken together, form a pattern not of disinterest but of internal struggle. They want to remain present without risking being known. They want to be near you while convincing themselves that you don't matter as much as you do. So they ration their time, monitor their speech and dilute their presence, but it always costs them something. Emotional suppression always does. In group settings, they may go out of their way to give everyone attention equally, even more to others than to you, so that no one, not even themselves, will detect the bias of affection. If someone were to say, "You seem to treat them differently," they would have proof to deny it. They might even say things intentionally to prove their indifference. They will say, "We're just friends," or "Never think about them like that," with a firmness that is just slightly too forceful. They are not convincing you. They are trying to convince themselves. Overcompensation also reveals itself in moments of emotional flatness. When you share something meaningful, and their response is curiously muted, when they meet your vulnerability with emotional minimalism, they are not being dismissive. They are regulating their response so that their true feelings do not leak out. They fear that if they show too much care, too much excitement, too much joy, you might see the truth they are working hard to suppress. So instead of mirroring your joy, they scale it down. Instead of matching your concern, they minimize it. There are also times when their indifference is interrupted by sudden, unguarded moments of warmth. A word of unexpected kindness, a look too soft to be rehearsed, a sentence that lingers too long. These moments betray the reality beneath their mask. But they quickly retreat after such slips, correcting themselves, hardening their voice, changing the topic. They are afraid that these glimmers might become evidence, and so they bury them beneath layers of detachment again. Even in their absence, they may try to prove that they are unaffected. They might stay off social media or avoid spaces where you are present, not because they are indifferent, but because seeing you would stir what they are trying to numb. Avoidance becomes a form of self-preservation. It is not your presence they reject. It is the presence of their own emotions that they cannot yet embrace. To the casual observer, they may seem uninterested, but to the discerning soul, their exaggerated indifference is the most intimate confession of all.